November 1994, I joined a privately owned company with 12 employees in our branch. Before Christmas, I asked my manager if we could reply and send some Christmas cards. She said that we use that budget to send our driver home to see his family. I knew that that was the company to work with. On the sad day of Sheikh Zayed passing, we donated the fund equivalent to the fee of putting a condolence message in the newspapers to UNICEF for their staff development, because this was important to His Highness. We measured what mattered. Over the years, the company grew, changed hand twice, and became a publicly owned company with many shareholders who were interested in their dividends. Our leaders became obsessed with data gathering, reporting, and we suffered from analysis paralysis. Countless management hours were lost on measuring and reporting KPIs and their targets, which we had to massage to satisfy our CEO and CFO. Needless to say, we were criticized if we overachieved or underachieved our targets. Can you associate with any of these scenarios? I was at my son's sport day, and the kindergarten had lined up these 3-year-old kids for a relay. One of them was crying. He did not want to be there. He wanted to be with mommy. Another two had no clue what they were supposed to do. They were looking this different direction to see what they're supposed to do. One little girl was more interested in her outfit than the race, but one boy had his eyes on that finishing line. And as soon as the whistle went off, he ran like a bullet, taking objects to the next point, positioning a ball inside the loop, jumping, and of course, he crossed the finishing line and won the race. If I could recruit, I would recruit him. Our little girl had to make sure that she positioned the ball exactly in the middle of the loop after dusting it. She became lost because even the ones who didn't know what to do had followed the leader and became second and third. Are you driven to meet and exceed specific goals and objectives as quickly as possible? Great leaders and successful people are focused on results, not the process, and will leverage resources available and solve problems creatively to get the job done. But then, how can you measure your success and make sure that you are measuring the right thing? Have you watched the Bee Movie? Do you remember Barry? He kept asking questions. He would say, why do we need to collect pollens? Why do we have to make honey? As children, we are great at doing that. And we ask endless questions. Everything is questions. Why do I need to drink milk? Why is the sky blue? Why? But as we grow up, we lose this art. And if we ask questions, we get frowned upon and labeled as difficult or uncooperative. We need to relearn to ask why. Let me ask you, why do we need to measure things? Imagine a world without measurements. No time, no speed limit, no head count on the number of employees, no fuel gauge, no weighing, no measurement for the prescribed medicine, no tests for the pilots and surgeons, no amount of our salaries. It's frightening, isn't it? But we should not fall into the trap of measuring for the sake of measurement. And we need to know the reason behind it. Beware not to measure to comply, but commit to achieve results. Think about the benefits and reasons behind measurements. You monitor companies' health, measure progress over time, make adjustments and stay on track, solve problems or tackle opportunities. You can analyze patterns over time and see when you need to take actions. So let's look at a few definitions. Metrics are your business as usual. They measure the things, okay, they can add value to your organizations, but they aren't critical measure you need to achieve. They are not those key performance indicators. Every key performance indicator, KPI, is a metric, but not every metric is a KPI. A KPI is a measurable value that demonstrates how effectively a company is achieving key business objectives. Objective and key results, OKRs, is a goal-setting framework for defining and tracking objectives and their outcomes. One of the key differences between OKRs and KPIs is the intention behind the goal setting. KPI goals are typically obtained and represent the output of a process or project already in place, while OKR goals are somewhat more aggressive and ambitious. This makes it crucial for every organization to understand both systems, and you need to have a combination of both if you wish to be successful. So what do you need to measure? Do you measure everything which can be measured? Do you measure things that are easy to measure? Do you copy and adapt a few KPIs from the internet or a course you have attended and then start measuring them? You should not do this. Do not measure for the sake of measurement. Sometimes we meet organizations that are so proud of having 450 KPIs that they measure on weekly basis and then they discuss in their management meetings. We ask them if they actually have time to make a decision and take any actions. Try to have smarter KPIs, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound, and then evaluate and review them to make necessary adjustments. As you do this, make sure that you compare apples with apples. I take my KPIs very seriously. In order to raise the bar, I always want to see what's next. How can I do better? And one day I was told that my colleagues' GP percentage, gross profit percentage, was twice than mine. I could not sleep that night. I had to find out why. I started looking at my own numbers. I could not find the reasons behind it. He was reluctant to share his information until I got hold of the data that was making this metric. I realized that he was not putting his speaker's cost into his final cost, the total cost, because he was saying they are employed by the company, they get a salary, so it's a salary, it's not a cost. While my speaker costs were going into this equation because they were freelancers. You realize we were not comparing apples with apples. It was apples and oranges, but I was getting penalized because my GP percentage was half of his. KPIs should be aligned to your strategy. Have a balanced approach in selecting appropriate KPIs and then standardize them across the organization. Have a combination of leading and lagging indicators. A leading indicator is a predictive measurement. The percentage of people wearing hard hats on a building site is a leading safety indicator. A lagging indicator is an output measurement. The number of accidents on a building site is a lagging safety indicator. The accidents have already happened, too late. Have a combination of strategic and operational KPIs because they are equally important. They just provide different information for different purposes. To be successful, You must develop and link your strategic objectives to the operational objectives, and then use appropriate KPIs to measure how your business is doing against those. An example of a strategic KPI is revenue growth, income sources, working capital, number of new contracts signed for that period. Operational KPIs, a couple of examples, could be absenteeism rate or overtime hours. Then have a combination of qualitative and quantitative measures. Quantitative measures, very easy. They're just a number, a weight, speed, a dollar. But qualitative indicators are not measured by numbers, and they include opinions and traits. When you're doing an employee satisfaction, is a qualitative measure, a qualitative KPI. When do you measure KPIs? Use a KPI when you need to track progress towards a goal over time. Goals may change over time, and performance and progress toward those goals certainly will change. So a KPI from 3 months ago may not be quite as relevant. This is why it's important not to set and forget your KPIs. Consider the seasonality and effect of different factors on your KPIs. You need to have enough touch points to reduce the bias and be able to see trends and analyze them. The purpose of monitoring KPIs is to determine if a company is on target for reaching business goals. Management might establish these goals for various periods, such as weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly. So you must consider these goals and their timelines when scheduling the collection of KPI data. Otherwise, you might collect data more often than necessary, which may result in an inappropriate allocation of resources. However, it might be necessary to monitor a KPI weekly in order to meet a monthly goal, such as a monthly sales goal. Align data collection with reporting so that they are not out of date. And collect data frequent enough to take the bias from your data collection. And then, listen to this, put an expiry date on KPI so that over time you don't become overwhelmed with the data collection and KPI reporting. Let me explain this. You are reporting to a manager who wants 10 KPIs to be measured. After a year, he changes, she changes, somebody else comes, they give you 10 KPIs to measure. Now you've got to measure 20. These could increase over time. If you did not have an expiry date on them, you would be measuring a humongous number of KPIs that nobody even looks at. So put an expiry date, evaluate and review. You remember SMARTER, evaluate and review, and then ask yourself, are they still needed? Do we need to combine some of them? Can we make an index KPI from some of them if they are still relevant? Who should be involved in selecting and monitoring KPIs? Do you keep your KPIs close to your chest, or do you actually share them with the stakeholders? KPIs are a very strong communication tool which can reveal a lot of information. You can make decisions based on these to take your company forward. Beware. Beware that measurement brings along accountability and responsibility. And that is why, that's one of the reasons that some people shy away from being measured and evaluated if they know that they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. If people perceive these as being policed, they will cheat. They will adjust the data to give what you want to see. But if they know why you're measuring and it's not linked to their bonuses, they will be less biased. They would provide you more accurate data. Your KPI is useless if it doesn't get communicated properly. How your employees, the people tasked with carrying out your vision for the organization, supposed to follow through on your goals if they don't know what they're supposed to do? Or even worse, not sharing your KPI risks, alienating and frustrating your employees and other stakeholders who are unable to see the direction in which your organization is heading. KPIs need context to be effective. This can only be accomplished if you explain not just what you're measuring, but why you're measuring it. Otherwise, they're just numbers on a screen that they have no meaning to you or to your employees. Answer questions why you've decided on one KPI over another. And most importantly, listen. Listening to your employees will help you identify where your organization underlying goals aren't being communicated properly. Get a buy-in from your people. Excite them to measure and to help you achieve that KPI. If you're just having a tick, so people are just checking out, they're filling in forms because they are complying, they're not committing. We were working with the ministry. People could set their targets for their KPIs. You as a manager need to know, once you've decided on the KPI, what the targets are. So this gentleman was responsible for strategic partnership. He put his target one meeting. That meeting took place on 2nd of January. And in this organization, they had red, amber, green, and blue. So he sat on blue for the rest of the year. And the other colleagues were wondering how come he's not doing something, until we did some investigations and we found out the reason. Obviously, they were getting visits from the minister and he did not want to lose face. You need to be aware of the targets and push them. Targets, you remember, realistic? If it's too high and I know no matter how hard I work, I kill myself, I'm not going to achieve it, I will disengage. If it's too low and I reach it on 2nd of January, you haven't pushed me far enough. So have realistic and attainable targets. And at the same time, have a champion. Somebody who would be responsible for collecting and reporting those data in a timely manner so that you can make decisions based on them. Where? Understand that KPIs are different for every industry and business model. Some of you may have big data. Some of you may not have enough data. What's important is to have credible data. You need to plan for the source of data and then have an actual data collection plan. Be clear and concise with your description of the KPI and do not use weasel words. A weasel is a mammal, maybe a little bit bigger than a squirrel, and they feed on birds' eggs. They go underneath the nest and they suck the content of the egg. However, the egg shell stays as is. So weasel words are the words that they look intact on the surface, but they're empty. When you're setting your KPIs and your target, communicate it with people and use things that is clear and precise to everybody. I know exactly what you mean by it. Often, when we create new KPIs or performance measures, we need data that we've never collected before. New data collection processes are often manual in their early days. They aren't automated until you fine-tune them and finalize them. It was actually funny because this ministry that I mentioned to you, they automated things before they started collecting data. And that's why it was so difficult to get into the root cause. Do not automate until you are happy with what you're gathering. And maybe you have to change your KPIs. Establish some best practices. First, only collect data that's useful to you. Second, define the exact data requirements which your KPI needs. Third, design your data collection process before collecting any data. Fourth, document the data collection process. So it's not she said, he said. And then the fifth one, keep the data in a single repository. Combine them, integrate them so that you can start seeing those patterns that would enable you to make decisions. If you want to automate, there are lots of organizations that can help you, but the most common tool for tracking KPIs is web analytics. Google Analytics is able to track many data from website performance to new subscribers to even your sales. And then how? Consider the benefit-cost ratio of measuring your KPIs. Sometimes we spend far too much time, resources, and money on KPIs. But when it comes to making the hard decisions based on these results, we shy away. The ROI of these activities become negative then. Identify the best KPIs and the most efficient and effective ways to measure them. So establish your goals and objectives, and based on these, establish your critical success factors, go and develop your KPIs, and then measure them. When you want to do your KPIs after having done why, what, when, who, where, make sure that they are aligned with your strategic goals. Start with your strategy. Choose KPIs that are directly related to your business goals. As I said, no metrics, critical indicators. Then define the questions that you need to answer to. Why are you choosing that KPI? What question do you want to find an answer to? And then identify your data needs and consider your company's stage of growth. Are you a startup? Are you a company like Walt Disney who's 100 years old? Your KPIs may not be the same, will not be the same. Evaluate the existing data that you have and then find the right supporting data. Go and determine the right methodology and frequency. For example, when we want to identify impact and ROI, we follow ROI methodology to actually collect data in a timely manner from the right sources and provide credible data. And then the who, when I mentioned, assigned ownership for your KPIs. Make sure the people who need to deliver, they know what they're doing, why they're doing it, when they're supposed to give you the data, what kind of data you want, and who's collecting it from them. Ensure that KPIs are understood by people within your organization. If I don't know your destination, how can I help you reach it? Find the best way to communicate your KPIs. Is it through a town hall meeting? Is it a memo? Is it a video? Is it a face-to-face meeting? Very important. Then review your KPIs to ensure they help improve your performance. And focus on those very few key metrics rather than a heap of data points. As we call them, there are KPIs, key performance indicators. And identify both leading and lagging, operational and strategic, qualitative and quantitative. And understand that KPIs are different for every industry and business model. I gave you an overview so that you can measure what matters. That's my email address. Please write to me and let me know if you found the session of value and benefit. I wish you all the best, and I'm sure you will be very lucky in measuring exactly what matters. Good luck.